Greetings, brothers. Today we're going to be talking about Fury of the Lost, the new Death Company based secondary. Got some interesting points to discuss, so let's get into it. So right before we get into it, my name's John, and if we're just meeting every week on the channel, I do various Blood Angels based tactics videos, so please consider subscribing. Now, Fury of the Lost got changed in Nephilim, so it looks to be a very reliable secondary if you are going to run probably 3 to 5 Death Company units, so I wanted to see what we have to give up to really make this viable. And with the changes to Fury of the Lost, at the end of every battle round, you're going to score 3 victory points for every enemy unit that's destroyed by Death Company, and we're going to score 4 if we destroy 2 units in a single turn using our Death Company units. We're going to score 1 additional victory point for that battle round if 1 or more Death Company units from your army were destroyed. So potentially at the end of the game, you're actually going to get points here if the opponent are killing you, and you're going to be able to maximize your points if you're killed over multiple turns. So, as we know, all secondaries do score 15 victory points, so let's break this down a bit. If you have 3 units of Death Company, and I don't think you would ever want to do this if you have less than 3, and you purposely send them off on like a difficult mission, basically to kill an enemy, and you expect them to die in different turns, but they do make the kill, then you're looking at 12 victory points, assuming the opponent kills them after they've killed the enemy. And I mean, it's a bad idea for opponents to leave Death Company models in their backline, so typically they will die. The idea with Death Company, at least since I've been playing them, is very much you trade. You try and trade a cheap squad of Death Company for something more expensive, and then obviously that's basically going to score you 4 each time you can do that. The best way to make the secondary work then is going to be looking at probably 4 units minimum. At most times when you send the Death Company off, they rarely do survive, right? So you can score 4 points if you kill 2 enemy units with the Death Company in the battle round, but unless you're going to heavily commit, I think this is going to be quite difficult, because you don't really want to be losing 2 units of Death Company in a single battle round, because that's only going to get you 1 point. So it's almost like this is a secondary that's going to be spread out across the game, and one of the most reliable things is that you're going to kill a unit each turn, and then you're going to possibly lose a unit each turn. That's going to be the best way to score this. So based on the suggestion, I thought maybe the best way to score this secondary would be to run 3 squads of Firstborn Death Company, and probably a Death Company captain. You could do this maybe with a lesser extent with the Death Company lieutenant, but I think the captain is the more spicy option, and the rerolls for hits are arguably going to be more valuable than rerolls for wounds, because hits like happen further up the order of dice rolling, right? So you're gonna get to reroll, or you're gonna get more value out of a captain than you are of a lieutenant. So assuming that all your Death Company units do die, and you die in 3 different turns. Bear in mind, in this example, I was talking about having 4 units. You're going to get 3 VP. If 3 of your units are going to get to kill an enemy in 3 different turns, that's going to give you 9 VP. And assuming that Captain joins the fray in a single turn, and that's the turn you kill 2 units with Death Company, that would get you 4 in that turn, so you get 1 additional VP. So that's going to score you a total of 13 victory points, which, given how difficult secondaries have become in Nephilim, and how some armies got very reliable scoring, there's actually like really good scoring for something that you're kind of going to do every game, right? You're going to have the Death Company obscured, you're going to jump out, you're going to try and kill a model, or a unit, and you're going to do that 3 times throughout the game. I mean, that's one of the key ways you can play Blood Angels is, you trade out a unit, you wait for the opponent to push onto an objective, you go and flip it back, and you trade with obscured jump units because they have really high threat range. So, let's talk about Death Company, and if we compare them against Sangre Guard, right? Because Sangre Guard are what everybody thinks is really strong. Sangre Guard went down in points in Nephilim, but so did Death Company. So, when you compare them, they get 1 less attack than the Sangre Guard, but that's made up when they charge due to the Black Range. They get 1 less on their save. They get 1 less on the leadership. They do gain a 6-up Feel No Pain, which in some ways maybe helps a little bit against the loss of the save. And then they're only 21 points per model, including the jump pack, which is pretty cheap, considering Assault Intercessors, for example, are 19 points per model. So the jump pack is very cheap. These guys obviously come with chain swords, and if you do not do anything fancy to them, you're talking 6 attacks with your chain swords, because You've got 2, +1 for Chainsword, +1 for Black Range, and then +2 more if you're an Assault Doctrine. So a 5-man squad gets 30 attacks with the basic Chainswords. Now, Chainswords have lost some of their value because of Armor of Contempt and stuff, so I'm not going to recommend you take many guys with Chainswords. But let's think about what we get from the Sanguinary Guard. So the Sanguinary Guard are -1 to hit in melee, so arguably a little bit more survivable than the Death Company. The second you start factoring rerolls into that, though, that -1 to hit in melee becomes kind of worthless. You know, if your opponent's got an army that does a lot of rerolling, you're not going to get much value out of that -1 to hit in melee. You're +1 to hit with your 6 inches of your Warlord, which is a fairly decent buff. I mean, like, if you think about that, it's like almost like a 16 or 20% buff to their damage output on their hit chance just if they're near their Warlord. So Death Company obviously don't get anything like that. But Sanguinary Guard are 30 points per model, and the other big thing that they get is they can heroically intervene 6 inches for 1 CP. And that is very, very, very powerful. And I think that's one of the main reasons that Blood Angels players love Sanguinary Guard so much. I know I do. It's because if you position them really smartly behind terrain, near objectives, you can always... It feels like most games there's an opportunity to get like essentially 6 inches of free movement, get an extra round of combat in the enemy's turn, fight first before they do because they didn't charge you, and then usually you can get some great benefit out of this. I mean, I've won games at tournaments purely from the heroic intervention you can do in Sanguinary Guard. Right, let's compare some points. 7 Sanguinary Guard with axes or swords would be 210 points. So that would be 630 points for the squad, and then Dante could potentially support them. You could then have like 5 Death Company with 4 hammers. You could do that twice, that would be 330 points. You could do 10 Death Company with power swords, and this is something that keeps coming up a lot. People were running Death Company with power swords, so I wanted to include them this week to see how I actually felt about them. And then we'll take a Death Company with the Relic Blade and Infernal Pistol. So basically, the Death Company Captain, basically the exact same weapon options as Dante. We'll come into their differences in a little bit. So the Sanguinary Guard and Dante would be 795 points. The Death Company are actually looking pretty good at 715 points. Remember, there is 8 Thunderhammers in here. You got 1 guy with a Chainsword, or 2 guys because it's 2 squads of 5. You get 10 guys with Power Swords. That's 50 Power Sword attacks. Power Swords are strength 5. They're like -4 in Assault Doctrine. I was going to say they're -3 into Armor of Contempt. And for this video, I'm working out all the numbers based on the fact that we would be in the Assault Doctrine. So, because usually, if you're going to run this many infantry, you're probably going to run a Sanguinary Priest, you're probably going to put your units into Assault Doctrine, so that's what we're looking at. Now, Death Company versus Sanguinary Guard in terms of survivability. And so what I've done here is I've worked everything out, and obviously it's kind of difficult to just compare these as is, because the Sanguinary Guard's squads are like 210 points. These Death Company squads, I've put the points here, you can see them, and you can also see that they get better if we use Refusal to Die. So what I did was divided all these numbers down by the points, so we can see how survivable they are per point. So then that gives a much better calculation. So if we look at this, this is survivability per point. So against bolt rifles and like flame storms, the Sanguinary Guard are ahead. Now, I haven't factored in the -1 to hit for Sanguinary Guard and melee, so this is purely for ranged. Death Company, per point, the Power Sword guys are pretty darn competitive. They're apparently per point, because I guess they're just 26 points per model. They're better at surviving against some things than the Sanguinary Guard, against high AP weaponry, right? Death Company with hammers are actually kind of not bad. You know, tiny like percentage points here difference between them and Sanguinary Guard now with the points drops. And if we do hit up some Refusal to Die, then you'll see here that your Power Sword Death Company are literally the most survivable thing, and your 5-man Death Company, they're pretty survivable again, outbeating the Sanguinary Guard in a few situations. Again, it's against those higher AP. Now, Refusal to Die is going to be pretty expensive. 1 CP on a 5-man, 2 CP on a 10-man, so I don't know if I would even use that much. I just was kind of surprised that 10 Death Company with Power Swords, like I said, that's 50 Power Sword attacks. Like, if you're running into 1 damage enemies, like Sisters of Battle, which are actually a nightmare to deal with in the current meta with their Armor of Contempt, then this 10-man Death Company is actually really, really good. So, What about the Death Company Captain versus Dante? I mean, like I said, both have identical weapons, the Infernal Pistol and the Relic Blade. Dante is going to get one more attack when they're in the Salt Doctrine. Dante's also -1 to hit in melee and range. He has 6 wounds and Armor of Contempt and a 2-up and a 4-up. Death Company Captain has 1 less wound, but he does have Feel No Pain on 6-up, and he's got Refusal to Die, no minuses to hit there. Dante can do Chapter Master rerolls, and he can also, if he is your Warlord, provide that bonus for the Sanguinary Guard to get more damage. Obviously, the Death Company Captain cannot provide that, because by being part of the Death Company, he cannot be the Warlord. And your Dante is going to get 1 free Epic Deed, but he is 40 points more expensive, and often we talk about a command point being worth about 25 points, give or take. So these two guys aren't a million miles apart. And I guess then it really just comes down to, are you going to want to take Fury of the Lost, or are you going to want to build your list around doing it? Then I think a Death Company Captain with 3 squads of Death Company here actually looks like a very reliable way of scoring Fury of the Lost, and you aren't losing out too much. I think you could still actually run this and still run like a couple of squads of Sanguinary Guard, because it's only 715 points. You add in like three units of troops, you've still got 1,000 points to play with. So you actually still have quite a lot of options. It's not like you have to commit your entire list to score a lot of points from Fury of the Lost. So then what I thought I would do is I'd grab a few targets that we might be fighting, like that typically are running Armor of Contempt, because Armor of Contempt seems to be the big elephant in the room, in that like when stuff suddenly becomes -1 AP, things become a lot more difficult, right? If you were thinking like Thunderhammers with -3 are great, into, let's say, Terminators, well, all of a sudden they become -2 into Terminators, so you know, Space Marine Terminators can save very, very reliably now against Thunderhammers. So what I would think I did was took a Leviathan Dreadnought, which is -1 damage, those Blight Lord Terminators are -1 damage, then a Nemesis Dreadnought and a Marine Terminator, which aren't -1 damage. So basically, -1 damage isn't going to affect the swords from the Death Company, but it is going to affect the Thunderhammers, and then -1 damage is also going to affect the swords from the Sanguinary Guard. So what I thought we could do is, if we work out how much damage each of the squads do based on their points costs, right? Because you're running 3 squads of these swords against basically 1 squad of power swords and 2 squads of hammers and chainswords. If we run all that together and then divide it down like we did before to see damage per point, what comes out on top? So when you do divide this down on top, then apparently Sword Death Company are really, really good against things that have like a really strong save, like a Leviathan Dreadnought, which has got a 2-up. So basically you need to hit it with those -4 power swords for it to be on its 5-up invulnerable save, and Blight Lord Terminators, which also have a really good save. So against like Thunderhammers, they're not going to be cutting through them as well as we might hope. I also wanted to look at like the Nemesis Dreadknights and the Terminators, so no -1 damage targets here. And when you remove the -1 damage, you do see that Sanguinary Guard do pull ahead a bit. But, and I guess when I say a bit, this is like 30% and 20%, which is equivalent of almost what the Sword Death Company do against -1 damage targets. Now, for a while there in 9th edition, -1 damage was like everywhere. Now, it seems to have fallen away to a point where Sanguinary Guard are good again. But I think both these, the damage charts and the survivability charts, with the recent points drop to Death Company, they are like, they're genuinely pretty darn good. Like, if you're a new Blood Angels player and you don't know what to play and you just wanted to go like always be charging, you could literally go 3 squads of Sandguard, 3 squads of Death Company, I guess 3 squads of troops, and that's your list, right? Like, that would be viable. That would let you take Fury of the Lost. It would also maybe let you take something like Behind Enemy Lines to just push forward into the opponent's deployment zone with all these jump units, and the troops I would probably take as Incursors. And yeah, when you divide these numbers down, it's actually really surprising at just how well the Death Company are keeping up with Sanguinary Guard. I heard a lot more people talk about the Sanguinary Guard since they went back to 30 points per model, but like, don't be sleeping on the Death Company guys. Like, they seem, when you work it all out, they seem really, really competitive into a lot of different options. One thing to say, and I made a video a few weeks ago about buffing the Death Company. I'm going to link that up above right now. Is the Hammer Death Company guys suffer a lot from the -1 to hit. Now, when you play Hammer Death Company, there's multiple ways in our list that you can improve these guys, like Chapter Master rerolls, the Banner from the Sangre Ancient, Quake Bolts, and I think that like Hammer Death Company really needs some help. The hitting on 4s is brutal, and just because of that, their damage falls away really nastily compared to some of these other numbers. Yeah, on the Armulus show in a very recent week, we just had someone submit a list where he submitted 3 times 10 Death Company squads. And it was the low points cost that really inspired me to make this video. So 21 Sanguine Guard plus Dante versus 20 Death Company plus the Death Company Captain. Sanguine Guard are going to cost 80 points more, but the damage and survivability across the board is fairly similar. Dante is going to be the swinging factor here in that he can basically give one squad of Sanguine Guard full rerolls, and the other one you could hang out with to let them hit on 2s, reroll 1s. That's going to be the swing here that puts the Sanguine Guard on higher damage than Death Company. But Sanguine Guard aren't going to score you 13 to 15 victory points every game for just doing what you do anyway, which is killing the opponent. And that is why I think this secondary is possibly the one that I like most on the rework of the Blood Angels secondary. A bunch of Blood Angels players, like just about everyone, is running 2 or 3 squads of Sanguine Guard, and then like 1, sometimes 2 Death Company. I do wonder here if there is a shift where like 3 Death Company and a Death Company Captain could actually be like really, really interesting. The 10-man with the power swords seem to have quite a lot of damage. And there is other ways. I mean, technically, you have 6 elite slots. You could run 6 Death Company units. You could run 4 Firstborn, and then you could run 4 Death Company Intercessors. We did have a joke about that, saying you would need probably 3 Repulsors, but it would be possible. And then you could have more Thunderhammers, and remember, those Intercessors do get an additional attack as well. So what I'd like you to do this week is, if you've enjoyed the video, or you felt like you got some value, hit the like button. And if you have been playing Fury of the Lost, and you've been scoring any amount of points, say over 10, because like 10 seems like a good scoring number for the new Chapter Approved, then please leave me a comment on how many units you've been using, what combination of units have you been using, and yeah, thanks for the suggestions in Discord to make a video around this, and I really hope you guys all enjoyed it. I, for one, hope to catch you in the next video. By the blood are we made strong, brothers. Peace.